You are a calm, deliberate, and confident. Imagine a room, a simple park bench in Washington, D.C., maybe the private office of a foreign dignitary, deep inside an embassy flying a hostile flag. Two men are inside, speaking in low tones. Their conversation could prevent a war or start one. Your job is to hear what they are saying. But the room is a fortress. It's been swept for bugs. The walls are solid concrete. The windows are sealed. There are no technological vulnerabilities. There is no way in. Your human assets can't get close. So you look for another way. An advantage so audacious, so unthinkable, that no one would ever see it coming. You're not looking to plant a device. You're looking for a vessel, a creature that can walk past guards, slip through open doors, and curl up under a chair, utterly unnoticed. The question that landed on a desk deep inside the Central Intelligence Agency in the early 1960s was as simple as it was mad. Could you turn a housecat into a spy?
Robert Wallace was not a man given to flights of fancy. As the director of the CIA's Office of Technical Service, the OTS, his world was one of tangible, practical solutions to impossible problems. He was the agency's real-life Q, a quiet, brilliant engineer surrounded by schemers and scientists, all dedicated to a single overriding purpose: giving the American spy an unfair advantage. This was the height of the Cold War, a time not of open battle, but of creeping existential dread. The Berlin Wall was a fresh scar across Europe. The Cuban Missile Crisis had brought the world to the very precipice of nuclear annihilation just a few years earlier. In the hushed halls of Langley, Virginia, the guiding principle was stark. We could not afford to be surprised again, ever. Knowledge was the only true shield, and every conversation, every whisper from Moscow or Havana was a potential key to survival. The pressure on Wallace and his office was immense.
They were the innovators, the tool makers. Their workshops produced lipstick pistols, exploding cigars, shoes with transmitters in the heels, and cameras the size of a matchbox. These were the conventional tools of an unconventional war. But the enemy was getting smarter. Their counter-espionage was sophisticated. The old tricks weren't enough. Wallace was tasked with looking beyond the conventional. He was asked to foster genius, to chase radical ideas, no matter how strange. The belief was that somewhere, in a lab or a brainstorming session, lay the next great breakthrough that could tip the scales of the global power struggle. He was a patriot, a company man. He understood the stakes. He had seen firsthand what a lack of information could mean. If an idea had even a 1% chance of yielding actionable intelligence, it was his duty to explore it. He dealt in the art of the possible, constantly pushing the boundaries of what that meant.
He had seen proposals for psychic spies, for weather modification weapons, for mind-altering drugs. In this paranoid era, nothing was off the table. But even for a man like Wallace, the memo that crossed his desk in 1961 must have felt different. It was an oddity, a new level of bizarre. The proposal was born from a simple observation. In secure compounds, at cafes, in the manicured gardens of embassies, cats wandered. They were a part of the landscape. Guards waved at them. Diplomats fed them scraps. They were ambient, ignored, and perfectly invisible in plain sight. The document that Wallace held outlined a concept of stunning ambition. It proposed taking this innocuous creature and transforming it into the most sophisticated mobile listening post ever conceived. It wouldn't just be a cat with a bug attached. No, that was too crude, too easily discovered. The proposal was to build the surveillance technology into the very body of the animal. A living, breathing, four-legged intelligence asset that could be directed towards a target and transmit everything it heard to a nearby surveillance van. On paper, it possessed a strange, compelling logic. In a world of secrets, what better spy than one that nobody suspects? Who would ever think to search the family pet for a battery pack and a microphone? The project was given an official, deceptively simple code name: Acoustic Kitty. For Robert Wallace, this was a test, not just of his scientific acumen, but of his commitment to leaving no stone unturned. The order was given. The file was opened. The CIA would allocate a budget, what would eventually balloon to a figure sources place somewhere between $10 and $20 million, to try and build the perfect feline spy. The moment he signed off on that initial research, the world of theoretical gadgets and clever pens fell away.
Robert Wallace and the Central Intelligence Agency had just entered the business of surgically re-engineering a living animal for the shadowy purposes of espionage. The real work and the true absurdity was about to begin. The challenge of Acoustic Kitty was a war fought on three fronts: technology, biology, and will. Specifically, the will of a cat. First, the technology. It was the 1960s. The age of the transistor was young. Listening devices were still clunky, powered by bulky, short-lived batteries. The OTS engineers, brilliant as they were, faced a problem of extreme miniaturization. They needed a microphone sensitive enough to pick up a hushed conversation from several feet away. They needed a transmitter powerful enough to send that signal clearly across a park or through an embassy wall. And they needed a power source, a battery, that could last long enough for a mission, but was small enough to hide inside the body of an animal. Their solution was the one thing, the shocking core of the entire project. This was not a collar. This was a complete and total surgical transformation. A veterinarian was brought into the top-secret project. In a sterile operating theater, somewhere deep within the CIA's facilities, the team went to work. A tiny, specialized microphone was surgically placed into the cat's ear canal, making its own anatomy a part of the listening apparatus. A small radio transmitter was embedded at the base of the skull. The battery, a custom-designed power pack, was implanted in the cat's chest cavity, a procedure so invasive and complex it took hours to perform. And then there was the antenna, the greatest engineering puzzle of all. For the signal to transmit effectively, it needed a sufficient length of wire. But where do you hide a long, thin antenna on a cat? The team's solution was woven into the declassified files, a detail that perfectly captures the project's blend of ingenuity and madness. The antenna, a delicate, hair-thin wire, was woven meticulously into the fur, running the entire length of the cat's back and tail. From the outside, the animal looked perfectly normal. On the inside, it was a piece of high-tech surveillance equipment, a chimera of flesh and steel. The official record, declassified in 2001, states with clinical precision that the procedure was a scientific success. The surgeons and engineers had done it. They had built a bionic cat. The device worked. In a controlled, laboratory setting, it could transmit audio. But that was only the first battle. The second was biology. The team quickly ran into a problem their electronic schematics hadn't accounted for: hunger. The delicate battery pack was drained by the cat's basic metabolic needs. When the cat got hungry, the device would sometimes short out. The living system was interfering with the electronic one. They spent months, possibly years, working on this issue, trying to create a device that could function inside the chaotic, unpredictable environment of a living body. And this led them to the third and most intractable front in the war: the cat itself. They had built a perfect listening device. Now they had to make it controllable. This task fell to the trainers. Their job was to take this surgically altered animal and teach it to follow commands, to go from point A to point B, to sit patiently near a specific conversation and stay put. This, the declassified files dryly note, proved difficult. You can train a dog. A dog seeks to please. A dog follows orders. A cat does not. A cat does what it wants. The trainers would release the cat, attempting to guide it with sonic cues or other stimuli toward a mock target. The cat would listen for a moment, then get distracted. It would wander off to find a sunny spot to nap. It would see a mouse and give chase. It would decide, for reasons known only to itself, to groom meticulously for 20 minutes. It was, in short, being a cat. One internal memo lamented this fact with an almost comedic sense of despair. The work done on this problem, it read, reflects great credit on the personnel who succeeded in molding the cat into a vehicle of this sophistication. But the environmental and security factors in using this technique in a real foreign situation force us to conclude that for our purposes it would not be practical. They had spent millions of dollars and years of work only to come up against the fundamental, unchangeable nature of their chosen operative. It was a perfect spy that couldn't be controlled. Pressure was mounting. The project had consumed a massive budget and the time of some of the agency's best minds. The initial enthusiasm had curdled into skepticism among the CIA's higher echelons. Robert Wallace and his team at OTS needed a win. They needed to prove that Acoustic Kitty could work, even just once in the real world. The decision was made to stage the first ever live field test. The chosen location was a park in Washington, D.C., not far from the Soviet embassy. The air would have been thick with tension. In a nondescript van parked nearby, a team of CIA technicians sat hunched over their listening equipment. Robert Wallace may well have been there himself, overseeing the culmination of years of work. The target was simple: 2 men, intelligence agents playing a role, sitting on a park bench. They were to engage in a fake conversation, one filled with mock secret information. The moment of truth had arrived. The side door of the van slid open. A handler gently placed the agency's most expensive, most technologically advanced, and furriest asset onto the pavement. The cat, the product of countless hours of surgery, engineering, and frustrated training, was released. The plan was for the cat to calmly walk the short distance across the park, perhaps 30 or 40 feet, and settle near the bench. From there, it would transmit the target's conversation back to the van, proving the concept once and for all. It took its first few steps. For a brief, fleeting moment, it must have looked like a success. It was headed in the right direction. The future of feline espionage
hung in the balance. And then a yellow taxicab appearing from down the street turned the corner. There was no time to react. The cat, in the middle of the road, was struck and killed instantly. Inside the van, there must have been a moment of pure, stunned silence. Millions of dollars, 5 years of secret development, the hopes of an entire CIA department, all of it gone in a brutal, meaningless instant. The first official mission of Acoustic Kitty was also its last. The project was canceled on the spot. In the aftermath, the official post-mortem was a masterpiece of bureaucratic doublespeak. In a now famous declassified memo, the CIA auditors wrote that the scientists' work was commendable. They had, after all, proven that they could build a cat into a listening device. The fact that the cat was not a trainable, directable agent was deemed a secondary, though admittedly fatal flaw. The final assessment read, "Our final conclusion is that the program would not be practical in a real-life situation." The file on Acoustic Kitty was stamped classified and buried deep in the agency's archives. It became an internal legend, a whisper, a cautionary tale traded by old hands at OTS about the perils of hubris and the folly of ignoring common sense. Robert Wallace's career at the CIA was long and distinguished. He was a brilliant public servant who oversaw projects that undoubtedly saved American lives. But the ghost of the cat followed him. Decades later, after his retirement, the story was unearthed by author and historian Jeffrey Richelson, using the Freedom of Information Act to pry the memo from the archives. In his later years, Wallace would occasionally speak about the project. He didn't seem embarrassed. He spoke of it as an artifact of its time. He recalled the immense pressure, the Cold War terror that made any idea seem plausible if it offered an edge. He defended the scientific impulse, the sheer technical audacity of his team. The acumen of the people who were willing to try it, he once said, was phenomenal. He saw it for what it was, a magnificent, spectacular, multi-million-dollar failure, a testament to a time when fear and innovation collided to create something truly unbelievable. Acoustic Kitty's legacy is not one of espionage success. It is a story about limits. The limit of technology to tame nature, the limit of human ingenuity to account for sheer random chance, and the limit of even the most powerful, secretive organization on Earth when faced with the stubborn, indomitable, and utterly untrainable will of a common housecat. In the silent, unending war of secrets, we seek to control every variable, to master every domain. But the story of Acoustic Kitty is a stark reminder that some things will always remain beyond our command. It teaches us that even for an agency that can topple governments and change the course of history, the real world will always have the final and often fatal say. This file is now closed, but the archives are vast. To be the first to know when the next dossier is opened, subscribe to Federal Confidential and turn on notifications. In the comments below, let us know which secret story needs to be told next.